Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today as we kick off our first co-hosted event here with the Grassroots Outdoor Alliance. Before I get into the introduction with our panel here, I did want to go over just a couple of quick housekeeping items with GoToWebinar, because we want to make sure that this is the best experience that we have for you here. So audio, you can look at either computer or phone audio joining us today. And questions, this is going to be a live question and answer panel towards the end, and GoToWebinar has its own question panel on the side there. So at any point, feel free and type in a question that you may have, and at the end, we will address all of them, hopefully time permitting. If not, we're happy to email and answer afterwards. Finally, one of the most common questions that we get here is, will you be sending out a recording? We absolutely will. All of this will be recorded, so if you do have to leave a little bit early, or if we happen to go a little bit over, not to worry. We are going to send a recording out for you to view later. So who is Management One? For those of you folks that aren't in the know, Management One is actually, we've been around for about 35 years, and our purpose is to provide financial security for our people, our clients, and our affiliates. And we do that through a focus on merchandise intelligence and education for independent retailers like you. We have a focus on our core values of a generous heart, courage, curiosity, adaptability, commitment, and collaboration, like events like these. And we've made a specific commitment to increase our racial and ethnic diversity with some programs that we're actually really excited to roll out this summer. So we'll have more on that later. But for now, I will turn it over to Mr. Dane Cohen.
Thank you, Nico. And I know that I speak for all of us at Management One when I say we are very excited to be co-hosting today's webinar with Grassroots Outdoor Alliance. Today's webinar, how COVID-19 changed buying. And we really wanted to make sure for this event that we have a really diverse set of voices from all sides of the industry joining us today. So I want to make some quick introductions. We have Carrie Watson. We're very lucky to have Carrie as our moderator today. Carrie is a GOA retail workshop editor and outdoor specialty retail coach. Carrie also works with Management One as a retail expert and has a past experience in corporate buying and independent retail. So Carrie will be moderating the panel today. Amy Quinn is with us. Amy is the buyer for men's and women's apparel and casual footwear at Great Outdoor Provision Co., located in North Carolina and Virginia, and she's been with the company since 2009. We also had Todd Givnish, who is the regional sales manager at Smartwool. Smartwool has been a long-standing partner of GOA, so I know he's very happy to be here today speaking on the panel. And then we have Sam Powers, who is the founder and principal at Power Sales Group. They represent 8 brands, including Smartwool, in 12 states in the North Central region. And behind the scenes, who was here to put this entire event together, is Dana Howe, the Director of Membership and Education at Grassroots Outdoor Alliance. And I know, Dana, you had a few quick things to mention on GOA's educational efforts.
Sure, thank you. First, thank you all so much for attending, and thank you, Carrie, and to our panelists for signing up for this. This session in particular came as an idea that I thought, based on some questions and feedback I was getting from retailers. People just really want to know how everyone is approaching buying, how everyone's going to approach spring, summer buy cycle. And we've also had a lot of feedback from brands and reps too, like what are the retailers interested in doing? How's everybody feeling? And so this conversation is really relevant and very timely. We offer education normally in person at our trade show. We will plan to have options for retailers, reps, and brands at the November show in person, but we have kind of expanded and offered some digital education, and we plan to continue to do that throughout the year. So really excited for this conversation. Keep looking for updates from us on the November show and education that will go along with it. So thanks so much, and I'll turn it over to Carrie.
Hey y'all, I'm so excited to be a part of today. Even though I haven't seen you guys, gosh, in like a year and a half, I'm glad that we can be reunited. At least you guys can see me, but I can't see you. Let's just get into it because I wish that y'all were kind of part of our initial discussion, organizing our topics, because we couldn't help but get into all the dirty details about what this buying cycle is going to be like. What's the strategy around it? What's going to be different? What's going to be the same? So for all intents and purposes, let's just get into it. So as you can see on your screen, we really wanted to talk about buying strategies and how we're approaching this buying cycle, and even like a little bit of a recap of what we've been experiencing, not necessarily the last 18 months, but more along the lines of the last 3 months, because things have been a little bit crazy in the supply chain. And so prior to this session, I had some early registrants and I emailed them directly for reasons like, why did you register to attend this webinar? And what exactly were you interested in hearing from our panelists? And so we put together a few quotes. So within the buying strategies realm, people were really interested in what do I need a pre-season that I used to just ASAP buy in the past? And how important are pre-season purchases? How important is it that I get them in on time? How much of my budget do I really need to be dedicating to pre-season and forecasting orders versus leaving some of my open to buy and my budget for ASAPing later in season? As we all know, managing back-ordered items, especially in hard goods and footwear, have been challenging to say the least this year, in soft goods too. But also, like, how do we pivot whenever my desired stock is not exactly in stock or it's not available? So I definitely want to start with Amy today. Amy, tell me, how has availability impacted you and how have you reacted? And just general, what kind of thoughts do you have about the last 3 months?
So I would say we're definitely feeling impacts of availability, and it's definitely a little disorienting when you feel like you have a plan set out and then all of a sudden you hear that 30% of your buy from a vendor is not showing up, or like, oh, swimwear is just not coming from certain vendors. And so it's definitely, I think the name of the game has been adaptability and really trying to think outside the box to address some of those shortfalls. So I mean, I know that I've been looking at some brands that I might have, randomly seen in an OR haul at one point and been like, oh, that's interesting. And now I brought them in, even though it was not part of my plan for this season, to fill out the floor. So definitely trying to adapt and like really reach back into my mind of like, all right, who did we used to see, or that one booth at OR or Magic or some trade show, and really going, okay, that's who I need to get that now because this other thing didn't come through.
Nice. Todd, tell me a little bit about your perspective on the topic.
Yeah, sure. It's smart. Well, fortunately, before the pandemic, we were definitely accepting more of the risk and trying to make in-season ordering a lot easier. We were investing more of our open to buy into our core items so that retailers could get back into those in season. Obviously, a ton has changed, and we've all been through some pretty huge peaks and valleys over the past 15 months. And I think, while we still want to support in-season reorders, especially of those core items, because of all the adapting that Amy just mentioned, we really need some accurate preseason orders for fall 21 and spring 22. Mix is really important. We need to know what our top selling items are going to be so we can invest deeper into those and ensure that they're available in season again down the road. The other part is, I think many retailers, I think Sam might touch on this, but many retailers are coming into the season with far less inventory than they've ever owned, maybe ever, or certainly in the past few years. Taking that into consideration is going to be really, really critical, that there's far less carryover inventory out there as retailers come into season. So I'd say that the pendulum is shifting back a little bit off of the retailer, or sorry, off of the vendor holding most of the inventory and allowing the retailer to be super nimble, and we need a little bit more guidance, and preseason orders are going to be more important for retailers to place than they have been the past couple of years.
Nice. Sam, what about you?
Yeah, I think most of our retailers did what made sense to them for spring 21. They placed preseason orders, but cautiously. We got more preseason orders for fall 21, but they were based more on sales. And what we're seeing is that the brand's ATS inventory is down significantly. We've had a lot of product that got canceled for fall 21, and the retailers had massive sell-through both for holiday and Q1. And the gap that's been created by the combination of great sales and lack of ATS is bigger than it's ever been. And then to avoid kind of the obvious pitch for more orders, I think it's fair to say that for our retailers, this is one of the biggest opportunities the outdoor industry has ever seen. We have record participation. We have a record low number of closeouts, right, for the liquidators. And the retailers that have inventory have a massive opportunity for customer acquisition. So to Todd's point, it's super important to plan your business. But it's also just as important to recognize the opportunity that we're going to see in the really for the rest of 2021 and beyond.
Yeah, those are all really, really good points. Thank you for that. Dane, what about you? I mean, you've got perspective from a lot of different industries, especially, well, and you're more of like a specialist with Management One and inventory planning. So would you add some color based on what you're seeing across other industries and even with the clientele that you work with?
Sure. And I'm going to echo a lot of what was already said, but there's kind of a tale of two retailers out there right now. Listen, there's a lot of retailers who have been hesitant to really jump back into that preseason buying process and really putting money out there. It's been a little bit of a interesting time, but what we have seen is the retailers that have stuck to their plan and have a sense of financial security can move forward and know that they're going to have at least a good portion of their goods landing when they need it to land. And what Amy said is, you may get a call from a vendor at any moment canceling 30% of your order. Well, at least you were bought to where you needed to be and you're not already behind the game. So, I think the retailers who are seeing success right now are the ones that are buying into their plan and confident, and able to adapt as it goes along, but who are sticking to a plan.
Yeah, totally. As everyone was writing down, as everyone was speaking, I was writing down a couple of things that just came to mind. And I thought maybe rather than being an active panelist, I would just give you a couple of tips that I tell my clients whenever I speak with them. And one of the tips that I have on this subject whenever you're looking for availability is some of my buyers that I work with that have had the best success in actually finding merchandise is when they go to their sales rep and they tell them exactly how much money they have to spend in a certain category. They are not exactly picky about the merchandise because I think we all know that we're kind of past the point of being able to be picky. But if you get that sales rep that's really motivated, they will go to bat for you and they will be really motivated to spend your money for you. So that's been kind of a fun thing that we found, and we figure out which sales reps are really responsive to basically growing their business whenever they have the ATS available. One common thing that I work with my buyers on too is the amount of their budget that they pre-season versus what they leave on the table and they design to use in ASAP dollars or ATS dollars later in the season. And I think we're going to bump those up about 5 to 10% for the next, maybe couple of buying cycles. I think there's just a certain amount of nervousness out there in the industry, and it does feel good to have product on reserve. So our budgets are definitely ever changing depending on the cycle and the season, but I do think that we're going to be using a larger percentage of them, especially if our growth trajectory increases. That's just, I don't know, it's something that makes us sleep better at night. And then also as part of what Sam was saying, payables in 2020, accounts payable, that was the lowest that a lot of my retailers have had payables be in a very, maybe even historic times for their business. And retailers were sitting on a lot of cash a lot of times at the end of 2020. And I had a few that reinvested that into technology. I had a few that reinvested it into e-commerce, bonuses for their staff, marketing reasons. But one thing that we really worked on is we knew that our inventory was on the low side. We knew that we were going to have to use some of that cash to reinvest in our stock. And that's what's really convenient about having open to buy a lot of times is it's less about how much, well, it is about how much sales were. It's less about how much receiving was. And it's really about what is the inventory that you need to make those sales happen. And that's what's really nice about having an open to buy based on inventory rather than just historical sales or historical receiving. Okay, so I'll get off my soapbox now. On the next slide, we're talking about the future buying cycle. And so here, there was definitely a lot of, maybe not anxiety, but just questions about what is this buying season going to look like? Because we all know that spring buying cycle last season was a lot different than what we were used to. And so how is it going to shift? How is it going to change? And what are people's plans? One person in particular said, man, I kind of miss trade shows because they forced us to have our stuff together and we had to be dialed. We had kind of a deadline to be ready for buying season, and we kind of had a deadline to be done with buying season. So we actually have a little survey, a 2-question survey that we're going to put in the background. So if you will take some time and just fill it out real quick, we'll make the results available a little bit later. But I think our 2 questions are just like, are you traveling this season? And I can't recall what the other one is right this second. But anyway,
I put it up on screen for you, Carrie.
Okay,
perfect.
perfect.
First one. So, do you plan to travel this buying cycle?
Mm-hmm.
And we can give folks a quick 30 seconds. We've got about 70% of the votes in, pretty resounding yes so far. We'll let it go a couple more minutes. And there you have it. That's a pretty resounding yes.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. We can do the second question now if you like too, Carrie.
Yeah, let's do it. Thanks, Nico.
All right. Second question would be, what is your preference for line presentations? And we'll give that one about 30 seconds as well. I've ran about 3 dozen of these webinars so far. I don't think I've ever seen votes come in faster on some of these. We've got about 75% of the votes in already. Usually it takes about a minute. So we have a very quick finger audience today. I like it. I'll give it about 5 more seconds and then we'll put the results up, but I think everybody can guess what these will be.
Wow.
It's a pretty resounding yes for in person.
Cool. Thanks, Nico. Appreciate it. Yeah, needless to say, I think we're all we're all ready to get back into in-person buying. So first off, I want to hear from Sam and then Amy. But Sam, and for you and your practice and your agency, what's been successful in the digital process for you, and how do you kind of see this progressing for this buying cycle?
So by far, the most success and best feedback we've had has been in pre-recorded content. The colors translate far better in that media, and we've invested a lot in studio equipment to make sure that it's as good as you can see the line live. We got pretty consistent feedback from our buyers that Zoom was very tough to execute either on their side or the rep side. But we are still going to offer Zoom for order reviews and assortment reviews and those types of things, of course. We saw the majority of our accounts for fall 21 in person. And honestly, it was extremely gratifying to hear from our accounts how much that meant to them. We are fully booked to see everybody in person for spring 22. Again, the feedback we're getting already is that showing up in person makes a massive difference to a buyer's ability to write their assortment, but also is a big indicator in terms of who is willing to invest both time and money in terms of travel to help the buyer get the best result possible.
Yep. Amy, what about you?
I mean, I think it's been interesting to see, you know, all the different steps that the reps and brands have taken to try and do our best with the, I don't know, what we were handed. I think for me, I sort of prefer live for a main showing, and then kind of go to the recorded content when I, you know, I'm trying to review something. So I still found that to kind of hold true, even though the Zoom didn't necessarily always have the best resolution. Just being able to actively talk through the catalog with the rep at the time still felt like a time saver, and I could go back and, you know, look at a recording for a color or something later on if needed. But I am definitely in line with the survey questions, and probably I think, like, I mean, that was actually surprising to me. There must be more extroverts out there than I thought, but everybody's ready to get back in person, seeing each other and being able to touch the merchandise and that. So I fall into that camp.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. One thing I think of when we're progressing forward is, what did I learn, or what did we learn, like, in technology, and how can data and technology help me in my future buying cycles and my future practices of efficiencies? So Amy, again, like, what do you think are the best practices that you're taking away from the last year and a half? And what do you think those best practices are in this new blended environment of both in-person and digital resources?
I mean, I think the in-person is still going to be my primary piece of the puzzle. You know, I'm still going to want to do all line showings in person, especially as a soft goods apparel buyer. But I do think that it's going to be nice to have, you know, as brands, it sounds like for the most part, are planning to continue to provide a little more digital content. You know, having those assets to go back to as I'm writing the order, and not having to rely on making sure I took the picture that I meant to take of that one thing. I think that'll be nice to have. And I think you know, this whole situation has really accelerated some brands having to do that. There were some who were doing it before, and now I think it'll become more commonplace.
Yeah. Yeah, Todd, what about you? What do you think are the best practices in this new blended environment?
Yeah, first, I'd love to commend our reps on the job that they did, learning some new skills really quickly, and all of them investing a ton of time and dollars into technology to provide their customers with quality solutions. As you just heard from Sam and Amy, there's certainly different benefits to both a live showing via something like Zoom or via pre-recorded. To me, the most important thing is that the rep is providing that content and having that engagement. We provide brand level information and recordings of the line presentation out to our sales reps, but the sales reps are there to provide their customers with another layer of expertise and really separate what the retailer needs from what everything that the brand produces, right? If you get a line presentation from a product line manager, generally they're going to tell you that everything is good, and your rep, if they're a good rep, are going to really highlight what you need for your business and your region and your customer, and tell you to skip a bunch of stuff, right? That's their job, and as a brand, we can't do that. So I guess to sum it all up, I think that digital content is still really useful for previews before an in-person line showing, or follow-up work like Amy mentioned. It's nice to be able to go back and reference some of that if you have some questions. It is often going to be far better content than a workbook or a digital workbook in CADS might be.
Yeah, before we go to the next slide, I want to make sure that we're actually running a little bit ahead of time, which is kind of nice for a panel discussion. But we're going to talk about opportunities next. But while our panelists are discussing opportunities, I think we're going to have quite a bit of time to review any questions. It can be as specific as you guys want, or even as general as approaches to your strategy, inventory, product, all the things. But Dane, you know, when you're thinking about opportunities, like where do you think it is for retailers in general right now? And do you have any tips or tricks to add from best practices in the blended environment of in-person and digital buying?
I think the word that comes to mind for me, and something that we've definitely been speaking of for quite some time now, since things have kind of picked back up pace, is adaptability. And you know, we're moving into a new era of retail, and there's going to be a blended buying environment. So although we all want to get back to in-person, I know I went to my first trade show event. It was fantastic being on a show floor. It was fantastic seeing and touching product, but we have to be, you know, keep that adaptability at the front of mind. So, you know, the most important thing is that we have retailers have the inventory they need in the categories they need when they need it. And so if that means that they have to get on a Zoom and watch the line showing because they couldn't make it to a in-person appointment, then that's what we have to do. And so although I do foresee the excitement building around in-person, as I am myself, you know, I think that adaptable mindset and forward-thinking mindset has to stay with us.
Yeah, totally. Todd, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's two big opportunities. One is there is a ton of new consumers who want to get outside and be a part of a lot of the activities that we at Smartwool and the Grassroots retailers support. I think it's a great opportunity for retailers to build their community and provide an inviting and educational environment. I'll pick on specialty bike retailers and specifically bike mechanics as what you don't want to do, right? They're classically, they know everything and they're not very approachable. You know, a great example of how to approach that is what Great Outdoor Provision Company does with their Get Hiking classes, right? It's a lot of really simple stuff that for us plaid wearing bearded guys, it seems like it's no big deal to figure out how to go hike, but for a ton of people, it's kind of intimidating. And I think GOPC has gained a ton of new customers by offering those classes. The second opportunity is the fact that the consumer is less sensitive to price and is really driven to buy when and where they can find product they want. Sam and I talked about this a couple weeks ago. Definitely the avid consumer is trying to plan ahead and seek out especially larger purchases sooner in the season. For a long time, we saw trends where the consumer was buying closer to when they need. They're breaking that habit. They're breaking their addiction to Jeff Bezos's business, and they're willing to buy as soon as they see the product. It doesn't really matter what price it is. So investing in the inventory and having it is going to gain you sales, and you're going to have less competition online and on price.
Yeah, for my fly fishing retailers in particular, we're looking at the progression of how someone moves from novice to expert to maybe somebody that books a trip of a lifetime to go fly fishing off the coast of Africa, for instance. And so we are kind of designing what that process looks like and the life cycle of what that customer, how that customer and how we interact with that customer over the course of not just the next, 2 or 3 weeks, but also over the course of the next maybe 5 to 10 years, because some people go through that process at different paces. But I definitely think that that's a good point. Amy, what do you think the opportunities are?
I think one thing that has come to mind for me as an apparel buyer is, I think, and it's easy to do in our industry, kind of get locked into the family of brands that you go to, year in, year out, and just kind of stick there. And I think this has kind of forced me to play around with like, okay, I could just bring in, this little new thing for my customer for a brief time period. I don't need to be signing up, that I'm buying from this brand for the next 10 cycles, right? So, just the willingness and the opportunity to do something like that, where it can be kind of little slices of things. And I think that the customer appreciates that right now too. They like, they're kind of having this fresh experience going back shopping again. And so I think we have an opportunity to really make the floor fresh and exciting, and give them things that they, maybe even haven't seen from us before. I know there's a couple different things like fire pits comes to mind that we brought in this past year that we, hadn't done before, and that was great. And I think our customers were excited about that. We certainly sold them. So I think things like that, where the customer is coming back and there's going to be something new that they haven't seen before, if they're returning, and they're going to be excited because, as Todd was saying, maybe they're even just new to coming into our stores.
Yeah, completely. Sam, what do you think?
One of the things we've been talking about in spring clinics is a return to focusing on the user experience. And this is really the foundation that the industry was built on, is providing that level of comfort and confidence that really enables users. We have more people that are new to the outdoors than we've ever had before. Many of them don't know what they don't know. So we've really been talking to retail staff about making sure that you go back to like selling socks with boots, and selling, beanies for people that were sleeping outdoors, et cetera, et cetera. So that's been a big focus, and it has really resonated, especially with owners and buyers that attend our clinics. Now, the other thing that we've seen really streamline the process for retail sales staff is when they really talk to the customers about brands that are tried and trusted, brands that the consumers may not already own, but they've been hearing about or a friend has recommended, et cetera, et cetera. And that has removed this this whole, sort of sidetracking the conversation in terms of, well, what is this brand and what are they all about, et cetera, et cetera. And then, finally, it's an important brand for us, but, one of the biggest wins we've seen is for brands that are multi-category, Smartwool being the lead there, where, the performance sock is a lot of times the gateway drug to the brand, but getting the consumer into one product like that really opens the door to a massive assortment of products that are sustainable, et cetera, et cetera. So a focus on brands that have a long runway with the customer has been honestly, it's been one of the biggest wins that we've heard about from our account. So I would say those are the two biggest opportunities that we've seen be successful and that we're talking about across all of our accounts.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I also think like some of the opportunities with my clientele base that we've been seeing is exactly that chance to be likable across different consumer groups and kind of appeal to different consumer groups that you haven't been in touch with before. I have a retailer that brought in an outdoor themed like gift section and an outdoor themed or even like backyard games. And the response that they had was absolutely phenomenal. It was a really cute little section that they curated off of Fair. They curated it off of Etsy. They had local artists draw even cute little greeting cards that were just blank inside. But just this gift section was something that they normally would never have touched because the owner is an accomplished ice climber. And it's just not something that he would have normally assorted because it's kind of out of his DNA. But they had a staffer that was really passionate about it. And so they let her go. And that section is at the front and center of the store. And people are coming back time after time to just come and see what's new in kind of that little area of the shop. So I do think that there's some interesting ways that we can reinvent ourselves, and we don't have to be the people that are just climbing Everest anymore. We can be the people that are just going outside on a walk, on a sidewalk, on cement with our kids, and that can be called a hike if we want it to be. So I'm really excited for novice people getting more and more passionate about what we have been passionate about for a really long time. Let's see, Dana, did you have anything that you wanted to add in particular?
Carrie, I can add one more if opportunity.
Yeah.
I think we've missed out, and I've heard this from a couple retailers, we've missed out connecting at kind of the brand strategy level, top to top meetings, that sort of thing over the past 18 months. And through a lot of social unrest, most brands have implemented and really made some progress on social responsibility strategies. And I think it's a good opportunity for retailers to do the same thing and figure out what's their angle, how does that work in their world and their neighborhood. One idea that doesn't relate to our business whatsoever, and I have no idea how Smartwool's involved in it, but is some of the Grassroots members have consignment business. And when you look at sustainability and keeping stuff out of the landfills, that's a great way to reuse items that may wind up in the landfill. And then the other part is accessibility and price. It provides, a much lower entry price point for people to come in and shop. And then the third part is it's a constantly changing inventory. That's going to bring people into your door on a regular basis. I don't know, like I said, exactly where some of the brands come in there, but it's just one example of how a retailer could, implement a social responsibility strategy pretty quickly and further engage in their community.
Yeah, Dana, what about you?
Well, this is great. I think this has been a really good conversation, and I'll echo a lot of what's been said. I think from the quick poll results, the overwhelming response is that people are really ready to go back to that in-person experience for seeing lines. I think the I'll agree with Dane. The opportunity, I think, for reps and brands is to recognize that that's the experience the retailer is looking for, but also for all three, reps, retailers, and brands, that we were kind of forced into a quick adaptation and quick pivot into some of these digital tools that could really help inform and be an addition to how we go back to in person. And so, leaning on some of those digital tools and including them in the process, but also kind of keeping with being able to see some of the product in person. And I think Nico mentioned this at the end of the session, but we'll provide a follow-up survey after this session to ask that question. If in person isn't an opportunity with a brand or a rep or for a retailer this season, what is the other preferred method? Is it Zoom, or is it, recorded content? I think the other opportunity is, retailers are doing well right now. And so, like Carrie said, cash flow is great. And so being able to expand in some of those categories and explore some more niche items, or finding some cool stuff that you might not have included in your merchandise before. I think there's an opportunity there. And then, like Amy said, with inventory and supply chain being challenging right now, maybe looking at additional brands that offer, some of the same products, or, maybe if you had that one item from 4 brands before, really highlighting it from one brand now because that's the brand that it's available for. Yeah, I don't know. I think I just echoed what everyone else said, but I think that there's some real opportunities here, and I think there's some excitement around the industry and excitement around our, what we provide our communities at our retail stores. And so, yeah, it's great to see new consumers, and it's great to see retailers thriving.
Yeah.
Carrie, to your point, I think brand and price approachability is super important right now. It's easy for retail staff to get excited about a $600 Gore-Tex jacket from a brand that sort of positions themselves as a, you must suffer for your experience. But approachability and fun, and more accessible price points. You can walk for miles and be totally protected with a great pair of socks and a $100 shell. And that message in terms of making it really easy for people that want to go outside and want to they went on their first hike last summer, now they want to hike longer, they want to paddle further, but making sure that that experience is accessible is to your point is super important.
Yeah.
And Carrie, I just wanted to jump in for a second, to kind of combine what you and Dana were saying. A lot of retailers are sitting in fairly comfortable cash positions, and now is a excellent time, as those July deadlines for spring 2022 orders are coming up. Now's a really good time to start thinking about that planning process. And we were speaking about this earlier, that the clients that are coming on board to planning services now, they're really getting in the driver's seat and putting their financial security and their business first. So I think having that moment to regroup and having that moment to kind of take a look at under the hood at some things that you're always so go. I think this is a great time to really plan for the future.
Yeah, that's I'm in the process of onboarding someone right now, and they are so excited to have by category budgets for the spring 22 buying cycle. Like, they are so pumped right now for that, because the process has just not been very formal in the past for them. And so they're outsourcing us to do it, and it's pretty cool. Thank you, everyone. All right, so we've got time for questions, and we're not going to do like live voice questions, but if you have questions, please type them in the chat box wherever you see your nearest chat box in your GoToWebinar. And we'll wait a couple of seconds, and we'll see. Nico will tell me if there's any that come through.
We actually do have one that came in a couple minutes ago, actually, and it was specifically to Amy. So Steve McCann is asking Amy, how important is it to keep the freshness throughout the season? And are you planning on doing anything different going forward to keep the floor fresh, like getting away from traditional outdoor model of the 2-season cycle?
So I would say that I've always definitely tried to schedule so that I've got, at least something fresh each month for the first like 2 or 3 months of a given season, which I would say, starting mid-January traditionally, or February. Now, I have found that this season, with some of the availability shortages, I have leaned a little heavier in terms of putting more units behind a single thing, and just making sure that that slot is always filled on the floor. So I always have a white shirt that someone could buy if they wanted, if a woman wanted a white shirt, I've got a white shirt. But I am definitely still trying to stay aware of keeping some fresh things coming, but maybe having a little more fun with that than sometimes we have. I know there's been some like tie-dye lounge sets that have made an appearance on our floor that maybe wouldn't have done so in non-COVID times. I know we've seen, I think, that customer being willing to have a little more fun with their wardrobe right now, like with overalls, and like some different things that, I think people are after a little bit of freshness, whether it's just seeing something that looks fun on the sales floor, whether it's been on the sales floor for a couple months or not. It's a fresh style for the season. But I would say I'm kind of leaning in both ways, right? So I've got some things where I used to have a wider variety of white shirts, and maybe now I only have 2, but I definitely have those 2. And then I'm using some of that, the funds that might have been eaten up in the fringe sizes of the other white shirts, to bring in something that's fresh and gonna just like one and done, burn it out, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. This is actually right in the wheelhouse for Management One, so I'll probably put it to Carrie and Dane to do a little follow-up to that as well on freshness.
Dane, go ahead.
Yeah, we love freshness here at Management One. So, keeping that inventory fresh is so important. And, I say this to a lot of people because I think one of the first questions that I get asked, just in talking to retailers, a lot of retailers have questions about social media and marketing. And I always say the best marketing you could have is when someone walks in your store and, walks in again and sees new inventory and something exciting and something that they are now, kind of pumped to come back into your store and revisit, because they love to see the fresh new product that's landing on your floor.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And even if freshness means receiving more of a SKU that you've already supported for 3 years, sometimes in the instance of packs or luggage, even just the act of going through opening a box, taking off the paper, and then figuring out a place to put this item on the sales floor. And it shows love to the neighboring merchandise. It shows love to visual merchandising. It gives attention to cleaning, and the shop is going to be a little bit fresher, not always in terms of like brand new, different merchandise, but also in terms of just visual merchandising. There's nothing less exciting than going to a retail shop, to me, where the front 30% of the store looks exactly the same as the last time I was there. One thing that I tell my clients is I live kind of close by a Target, And when that one like corner end cap section of Target is the exact same as when I was there 2 months ago, it's kind of a disappointment because that section has the reputation of always being kind of new, exciting, different, interesting. And so when it's just the same as last time and picked over, then I spend zero time there. But if it's gotten a little bit of love, if it looks a little bit different, then yeah, I'll spend a little bit of time, a little bit of extra time looking at it and kind of discovering the newness there. But yeah, I think, yeah, freshness is definitely something that can be underrated because for a lot of us, even we might even front load our preseason orders where we might bring in 50% of our entire season sales in the first 2 months of the season, and it all goes on hangers, it all gets put on shelves, and then it just kind of sits there and collects dust until December or until June, July, when sales really happen. And so again, just the visual merchandising might suffer when we're not prioritizing freshness. So.
The consumer is really also shifting the season forward. Retailers that freshened up base layer and even insulated layering in January and February this year had huge wins. We think the same thing is going to happen this summer, where the consumers are going to buy sandals way later into the season as they use them and as young people go back to campus. So I think there's two opportunities here. One is to kind of plan for that. I mean, a lot of people don't think about freshening up base layer or fleece in January and February, even though it is in the spring buying cycle. But I love what everyone is saying about keeping it fresh, because the consumer is coming back. And we think maybe the base layer season is tapering off in January and February, but it's not. We think the sandal business may be tapering off the end of June, but it's not. And the consumers are they're responding very strongly to keeping some of those categories fresh way longer than we've seen in the past.
Hey, don't forget to fund the fun. You got to make sure you're in stock on those core basics to fund the fun stuff.
That's actually a good segue into the next question, because it sounds like a supply side question. So possibly Todd or Sam would be best on this one. But Woody DePerna is asking, will things be more normal for the S22 cycle? And maybe how will India affect things with what's going on there now?
I think every brand has its own supply chain challenges that they need to manage through. I think keeping an eye on what's going on out there as far as raw materials go, and different countries where things are being produced and being ready for plan B, C, and D is important. I think the biggest thing that we're all dealing with is the ripple that got sent through the global supply chain and turning everything off last March, and then turning it on and trying to twist the throttle all the way to its max in July and August. And that's just a long term, it's having a really long-term effect. Shameless plug, we couldn't turn off the sheep down in New Zealand for the wool. So we're in a pretty good spot at Smartwool.
Yeah, I think there's two answers. One is supply side, but I also think there's another answer relative to the consumers. And I think there's a very good chance that we're going to see a massive back to campus business this fall, and then that could be followed up by a massive travel business in spring 22. So I think those are two consumer categories that I think will sort of exceed back to normal. And then from a supply side position, it's going to be a challenge, I think, through spring 22. And we look at categories like tents, where available here from bike shops. Inventory is pushed way out. So as a retailer, planning what you need to fund all aspects of your business with orders is going to help secure that future. And I think you can count on cancellations and you can also count on way lower inventory levels that are going to be harder to fill.
I think one more thing that'll make it more normal is, you know, somebody mentioned earlier that we haven't had a break. We haven't been able to set plans and stick to them. We've had to remain super adaptable and agile, and that's on the retailer and the brand side. I think we will get back to a little bit more normalcy and being able to come up with a plan and stick to it the further past spring 21 we get.
Sam, you mentioned canceling orders because that's a perfect segue to the next question. This is probably a question more for Amy or Carrie. I don't think Todd or Sam like these questions, but when do you recommend canceling back-ordered spring items?
I mean, it depends what you need. So right now, you know, the questions that I'm asking myself as I look at some of what's remained open, which we've just contacted all of our apparel vendors to say, what open lines do you show us having, to make sure first that we're on the same page about that. And then as far as what I'm taking, what I'm keeping open, some of the questions I'm asking are, what have you revised your MAP policy? You know, are you holding full price later into the season? I know at least 2 or 3 vendors have said that they're holding price 2 weeks or more beyond when they typically do, which means I still have a longer season to sell that item. So that's one thing I'm looking for right now. And if, sorry, Todd and Sam, but especially Todd, if a brand is not doing that, then I'm saying, okay, this is very late. What can you give me a discount on that? Because I'm not going to have the full price selling season to deal with it. And then still going by category to a certain extent and making sure that it is a category that I need product for, because if it's not, then, you know, I may need to use one of these creative solutions through an alternative brand that I didn't know about, or something to keep me in the game in the category that I do need, you know. So like if I need, you know, elastic and quick dry shorts and there's brands that don't have their elastic quick waistband quick dry shorts as much available, then like it's not going to help me to buy a button down shirt. Like I need to find someone, you know, whoever it might be, that has that type of product available in that category. And if I have to go beyond my normal round of brands to do it, then that's what I need to do.
Yeah.
So Dan, I feel like I kind of want to weigh in here just briefly relative to cancellations. And the first thing I would say is don't cancel orders before you need to. You know, we were telling our buyers that some orders are going to be late, et cetera, et cetera. And the first thing they were like, well, then I'll just cancel it. I don't want to get backed up in my inventory. And I'm like, well, just so you know, right? Like if you're canceling a June 1 order on March 15th, when we get to June 1, or even May 10th, you may want that order. So don't cancel orders. Don't cancel orders before you need to. And then the second thing is, for a lot of our accounts, if somebody's canceling an order, that means that they've placed a preseason order that has been optimistic about their business, and maybe they're trimming it, maybe they're shifting. But having that dialogue, we always welcome, because it lets us know how we can better plan in the future, and also address a need that may come about if another category or something like that is working and it's an open to buy shift.
Excellent. So we have one more question. I know we're at the hour mark. If the panelists are okay fielding one more, it's a bit of an open-ended question because it touches, I think, on everybody. But Kirk Haskell is asking, how are you dealing with staff and reps and vaccinations? Is it a requirement? What's the conversation? I think that's actually really relevant to the buying cycle in the next 6 months.
I think Amy should take that because it's coming from a rep. So I think it's asking more the retailer how you're handling it.
So I don't know what our like folks on the floor. I'm not part of like on the floor side of things right now, so I don't 100% know as far as our managers and our floor staff the situation. I know that in North Carolina here, eligibility is open to everyone, and that you can, for the most part, find an appointment for a vaccine if you're looking for one. I know for us, it hasn't really been a question for most of our buying team. I think we're all basically fully vaccinated and ready to go for in-person meetings and stuff like that. We did have, well, we still do have sort of our on-site showroom space. We're still not having reps come into. We do have something that's like not in our offices and in our personal GOPC space that we're using, but I wouldn't be surprised if that changes. So I would say, I don't know, that's kind of where Great Outdoors at. I think most of our staff has been enthusiastic about getting vaccinated, and that's making them feel safer on the floor, helping our customers. And here where we are fortunate to have the ability to do that in terms of our vaccine supply. So, but I know that we've used like a tracking app to kind of communicate health with our floor staff and make sure, you know, our managers can know who's healthy, who's not, and why, just to kind of make sure we're covered in terms of staffing the floor. Hopefully that helps.
My last little bit is my 2 cents is right now, that's going to look like people wanting to do online showings only and not meet in person. I think it might be another 6 months until we really see any kind of, do you have a vaccination or not, because that's going to impact if I see you in person or not. I still think we're a little bit further away from that, from being so black and white. I think right now it's just going to look like, no, I prefer a digital showing. But anyway, but yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for participating. Thank you, Dane, Amy, Todd, Sam, Nico, for putting together our slides and being our back end help. Dana, thank you for organizing, and thanks for coming up with the idea and inviting all of us to be part of the panel. So we'll have a follow-up survey question. We will have the recording available, and you'll be emailed a link to that. And that is everything I can think of. Dana, do you have anything to add?
No, this is great. Thank you so much. Really important conversation to have and timely.
Yeah. Nico, anything operational to add?
Yeah, for any folks that didn't want a live question out there, we did put contact info up on the screen for all of our panelists. We're gracious enough to include their email address. So feel free and shoot them a question, and we can keep the dialogue going. And I'll echo the thanks as well. I definitely enjoy a lot of these more niche collaborations because Management One works with so many different verticals in the retail space. So it's really nice to go into something as niche as just the outdoor space and see exactly what the conversations are in that area. So I was really thrilled to have the opportunity to work with all of you here, and we will get cracking with Dana to work on the next one.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.